Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Supreme Court strikes down the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. A Chief Justice-led 5-judge bench rules that information about funding of political parties is essential for the effective exercise of the choice or vote. Adds the unlimited corporate funding to political parties violates the principles of free and fair elections. The Apex Court directs State Bank of India to stop issuing electoral bonds, orders them to submit details of all electoral bonds purchased and encashed by political parties to the Election Commission by the 6th of March, also directs the EC to publish information received from SBI on its website by the 13th of March. Further, the court directs that bonds which have not been encashed should be returned to the purchaser and the amount refunded. Bulls maintain the winning momentum on Dalal Street. The Sensex gains over 200 points and reclaims the 72,000 mark. Mid-caps outperform the blue chips. The GST enforcement body issues summons to India offices of foreign airlines, including British Airways, Lufthansa, Etihad and Singapore Airlines, allege tax evasion on import of services from the head office by the Indian branch offices, seek clarification over the payment of crew salaries, staff expenses. Indigo sources say that the airline is likely to cancel up to 12 flights a day after the government issues a directive to the Mumbai International Airport on reducing flight operations to curb congestion. Sources add that Vistara may cancel up to 8 flights a day. Paytm confirms receiving notices from authorities including Enforcement Directorate. Stocks tank further 5% in trade. RBI sources say the central bank is unlikely to intervene in any bank's decision to partner with Paytm or take over merchant accounts. Mahindra Group CEO Anish Shah responds to Tesla's EV plans for India, says they welcome global competition but insists that entrants must make in India if they believe in India. Also bats for support to EVs as they offer lower cost of ownership and cut emissions. Farmer organizations set to resume the third round of talks with the government in Chandigarh this evening. Organizers asked protesters to halt their march to Delhi ahead of the talks. Meanwhile, farmers begin their rail roko protests across multiple railway stations in Punjab. Israel confirms that their special forces have stormed a hospital in Khan Yunis. Said they had credible information that Israeli hostages were being held there. Some say hostages are dead. Israel's finance minister rules out any possibility of a two-state peace plan. Chipmaker Nvidia passes Alphabet as the third most valuable company on Wall Street, only behind Microsoft and Apple. Well, let's go straight to the top story this evening. The Supreme Court has struck down the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. A 5-judge bench led by Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud ruled that anonymous electoral bonds are violative of the right to information under the Constitution. The court said the infringement on the right to information is not justified for the purpose of curbing black money, and the donors get access which translate into influence over policy making. So what are electoral bonds exactly? Now, they were first introduced in 2018 and allowed individuals and domestic companies to donate to political parties of their choice by buying these bonds. The sale happened through 29 branches of the State Bank of India. There were no limits on the number of electoral bonds that can be purchased, and political parties were also not obligated to disclose the identity of donors or report the donor data to the Election Commission. So there was no cap on the amount and there was no restriction on disclosure. The concerns around electoral bonds increased ahead of the Lok Sabha elections in 2019. In the months leading up to the polls, political parties received anonymous funding worth 2,700 crore rupees through electoral bonds, which was the highest ever. NGOs like the Association for Democratic Reform and Common Cause moved the Supreme Court about 6 years ago. The case was adjourned multiple times, during which the total sale of electoral bonds has crossed 16,000 crores. And now the Apex Court has deemed that these bonds are illegal and unconstitutional. Here's the Chief Justice, D.Y. Chandrachud, delivering the unanimous verdict of the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court of India.
The electoral bond scheme and the impugned provisions, to the extent that they infringe upon the right to information of the voter by anonymizing contributions through electoral bonds, are violative of Article 19(1)(a). The electoral bond scheme is not the only means for curbing black money in electoral financing. There are other alternatives which substantially fulfill the purpose and impact the right to information minimally when compared to the impact of electoral bonds on the right to information. Contributions made by individuals have a degree of support or affiliation to a political association. However, contributions made by companies are purely business transactions made with the intent of securing benefits in return. The amendment to Section 182 is manifestly arbitrary for treating political contributions by companies and individuals alike. The deletion of the mandate of disclosing the particulars of contributions violates the right to information of the voter, since they would not possess information about the political party to which the contribution was made, which, as we have held above, is necessary to identify corruption and quid pro quo transactions in governance, information which is necessary for exercising an informed vote. The amendment to Section 180(3) of the Companies Act becomes otiose in terms of our holding that the Electoral Bond Scheme and relevant amendments to the Representation of the People Act and the Income Tax Act mandating non-disclosure of particulars on political contributions through electoral bonds is unconstitutional.
Well, that is the Chief Justice. Ashmit has been tracking the action in the Supreme Court. He joins us now with the latest. Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Historic judgment of the Supreme Court, long time in the making. The judgment itself is reserved in November of 2023. But nevertheless, the impact and the implications now of this verdict, Ashmit.
Well, the impact itself will grow manifold from here, given the fact that it's coming just a few months ahead of the Lok Sabha elections. But that's, of course, a different story altogether. With respect to the Supreme Court judgment, well, there were two key aspects that we heard the Chief Justice take exception to. One was the right to information of the voter. He talked about a participative democracy where the voters need to take informed decisions. And towards that end, took exception to how the electoral bond scheme placed restrictions on this right to information. In fact, the Supreme Court very clearly held that the centre has failed to demonstrate as to how the electoral bond scheme was the least restrictive mechanism. He pointed out there are other alternatives and that this needn't be the only course of action. So that's one side of the story. The other is with respect to corporate donations. Here again, we just heard the Chief Justice point out that contributions that are made by corporate entities are in the nature of business transactions, that they're looking to achieve a certain objective, that this raises the bogey of quid pro quo and therefore frowned upon. The restriction that the cap that had been placed on corporates to make donations was removed entirely under this new scheme of electoral bonds. And that is again something that the Apex Court has frowned upon, has held to be unconstitutional. So legally speaking, the provisions, the amendments that were made to the IT Act as well as to the RP Act, which exempted political parties from recording these contributions individually as per the donor, those provisions have been struck down. Also, provisions of the Companies Act, which, number one, lifted the cap altogether, allowed for unlimited contributions from corporate entities, has also been struck down. And importantly, the exemption that companies had been given under electoral bonds, that they're not required to register or to record the donations that they are making to political parties, also having been struck down by the Apex Court. So unequivocally, the electoral bond scheme, the way it stands, being told to be unconstitutional by the Apex Court. As far as the way forward is concerned, well, the Supreme Court has said that no further bonds are to be issued. The SBI is to share all the donor details from April of 2019 till date with the Election Commission, and the Election Commission has been directed to publish these donor details on or before 13th of March. So that's the deadline that the Election Commission as well as the State Bank will be working with. In fact, speaking of the judgment, just moments post this pronouncement by the Apex Court, we reached out to the top legal eagles involved in this matter, arguing for the petitioners, Prashant Bhushan, as well as Kapil Sibal. Let's in fact listen in to what they had to say.
Not only the electoral bond scheme, but also the amendment which removed the restrictions on political contributions by companies, which were that you cannot contribute more than 7.5% of your annual profit by way of political contributions. That has also been struck.
What Supreme Court says is you look at donors who donate less than 20,000, right? He said there cannot be any element of quid pro quo there. For donors who donate more than 20,000 rupees, right? And electoral bond scheme is an entirely different scheme, because those who wish to donate by check 20,000 and more, their names will be disclosed. But those who donate through electoral bonds, their names will not be disclosed. What's the rationale for that?
Well, that is Kapil Sibal there, one of the lawyers for the petitioners in this matter. Let's shift our focus now to the day's market action. The Lal Street did build on yesterday's gains. The Nifty and the Sensex ended 0.5% high. The Sensex reclaimed the 72,000 mark. The broader markets outperformed the blue chips, with the Nifty Bank and the Nifty Mid-Cap Index soaring about 1%. That's the Nifty up by about 70 points. Sensex closing 220 points higher. The Nifty Bank up 310. The Nifty Mid-Cap 490 points higher. That's the market snapshot for the day. India's trade deficit in the month of January is narrowed by over 11% to $17.4 billion on a sequential basis. This as exports rose 3% year-on-year to $54 billion. Merchandise imports also rose 3% year-on-year. However, that figure was lower than December of last year. Meanwhile, gold imports rose to nearly $38 billion against $29 billion last year. Shares of Paytm down another 5% in trade today. This after investigative agencies began preliminary inquiries to look into possible violations. The stock exchanges revised Paytm's circuit limit lower to 5% from 10% earlier. Paytm confirmed receiving notices from authorities, including the Enforcement Directorate. We learned from RBI sources that the central bank is unlikely to intervene in any bank's decision to partner with Paytm or to take over merchant accounts. Ritu standing by now with the details. Ritu, what else is expected from the Reserve Bank now as we approach that 29th February deadline?
You know, with the February 29 deadline looming over Paytm Payments Bank, we've been given to understand that the regulator is unlikely to intervene in any bank's decision to partner with Paytm or take over its merchant accounts and leave any commercial decision on any transaction whatsoever between Paytm and banks to the individual entities. Further, going by past instances, whether it was Yes Bank, DHFL or others, we've also been given to understand that RBI is unlikely to provide any exemptions for the migration of accounts to other banks. Meanwhile, Paytm, we understand, has been engaging with several top private and public sector banks to set up its nodal account to move the merchant bank accounts and create new UPI handles. Now, how much of this gets done before the Feb 29 deadline? We'd have to see. And if not, is RBI going to consider extending the deadline? That's also a question that will likely be tackled only closer to 29th of Feb. The FAQ on Paytm Payment Bank, meanwhile, is expected very soon. We've been given to understand that this FAQ will solely focus on customer-centric issues, and RBI has been consulting with a whole host of authorities to be able to answer customer queries, and these authorities include NPCI, the National Electronic Toll Collection, the National Highway Authority of India, metro authorities, as well as others. Broadly, the FAQ is going to clarify which customer services get affected after the 29th of Feb and which services will continue to be available for users and so on, and guide customers on their wallet usage, FASTag accounts and so on.
Ritu, many thanks. Time for us to head into a short break. But up next, Mahindra Group CEO Anish Shah responds to Tesla's EV plans for India, says they welcome global competitors but insist that entrants must make in India if they believe in India. That and more when we return. Mahindra Group CEO Anish Shah says that global competitors like Tesla should manufacture in India if they want to enter the market. Speaking exclusively to CNBC-TV18, Shah also emphasized on the need for more incentives to EV makers as they offer low cost of ownership and cut emissions. Take a look.
The government is keen to have the likes of Tesla win fast here. There is a new EV manufacturing policy that is being discussed, essentially giving duty concessions to companies who commit to manufacturing in India in a 2 to 3 year time frame. What would be your view on this?
So, Parikshit, our message to these companies is, if you believe in India, then make in India. It's not fair to consumers if companies just import from outside without a commitment to the market, especially in the auto industry, where the consumer would look for a commitment that the company is going to be with them for a long term, for the duration that they have the car. India today also is in a very strong position globally, and we've got a very strong focus on make in India, and that really should be the path forward for us as we go towards a much stronger economy. We've got a large number of foreign makers in India. The auto industry has been a very competitive one for the last 20-25 years.
Is hybrids a model that you would be considering as you focus heavily on EV transition?
So we are ready with hybrids. In fact, we had to make a choice whether we go ahead with hybrid or EV or both. And the choice we made was to go with EV because hybrid is really an extension of ICE. If we look at the benefits of hybrid, one, it has slightly higher fuel efficiency, emissions are more or less the same, and the cost is higher. So hybrid doesn't really change the game as electric does. The EV ecosystem will have a significant change, a much better set of products, much lower operating cost, emissions are close to zero or zero as such, and therefore that's really going to be the path for the future. That requires some incentives which the government has put in because a number of things have to change for that.
Anisha Mahendra. On to a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. The GST enforcement body, the DGGI, has issued summons to India offices of foreign airlines, including British Airways, Lufthansa and Etihad. This comes after the DGGI alleged tax evasion on import of services from the head office by the Indian branch offices. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 the summons have sought clarification on payment of crew salaries and staff expenses. Timsy standing by with more details. Timsy, what's the problem that the DGGI has with foreign airlines?
Well, that's right. What sources are indicating to us is the fact that the Indian offices of foreign airlines are under DGGI scanner. Remember the Directorate General of GST Intelligence. They had earlier also conducted some raids in October last year, and now what sources say that DGGI has issued summons to Indian offices of British Airways, Lufthansa Airways, Singapore Airlines, Etihad, Thai Airways, Qatar Airways, Saudi Arabian Airlines, Emirates, Oman Airlines, Air Arabia, etc. And what we are given to understand is the fact that the DGGI has alleged tax evasion on account of import of services from head office by Indian branch offices. DGGI has sent summons to these Indian offices seeking clarifications over payment of crew salaries, staff expenses, services provided or billed against the head offices abroad. The allegations also includes that these headquarters which are located abroad have a branch office in India which is permitted through RBI to remit forex related to passenger sales and cargo sales. However, other air services that are offered by the head office abroad, which includes rental, maintenance of aircrafts, crew salary, etc. Thus, these services coming from abroad were liable to GST under reverse charge mechanism, which these airlines have not been paying. To be precise, DGGI's Meerut zone and Mumbai zones have conducted these investigations, and they are the ones who have sent communications and summons to these airlines. Let's see what happens, because when CNBC-TV18 reached out to these airlines, we are still awaiting comments. Let's see what is the final outcome, how much is the quantum of evasion, and what gets realized. We'll keep you posted.
Timsy, many thanks for joining us. Indigo sources have told CNBC-TV18 the airline is likely to cancel up to 12 flights a day. This after the government issued a directive to the Mumbai International Airport on reducing flight operations to curb congestion. Sources add that Vistara may cancel up to 8 flights a day. Business 360, there's a lot more coming up for you right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned, the news will continue.